So, how does a single violent event in Washington, D.C. spark a plan for one of the biggest changes to immigration we've seen in a long time? Well, that's what we're digging into today. We're going to break down Donald Trump's plan to use a pretty controversial 70-year-old law to potentially stop immigration from a whole list of countries. Let's get into it. Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the specific incident that kicked all of this off. Then, we'll zero in on the powerful legal tool Trump says he'll use and figure out what it actually lets a president do. We'll also unpack some of the terminology being thrown around, and finally, we'll see exactly which countries are on the list. So, let's start at the very beginning. What set this whole thing in motion? Well, it wasn't some long policy debate or a slow change in thinking. Nope. It was one single, violent event, right in the nation's capital. The catalyst was a really tragic shooting in D.C. An Afghan citizen shot and killed 2 National Guards. And just like that, this one event became the immediate reason for a huge policy announcement from Donald Trump. And the response? It was fast. Right after the shooting, Donald Trump went on Truth Social and posted this. He made it super clear he was going to use the Immigration and Nationality Act to suspend the entry of aliens. And yet, that's the actual legal term from the act itself. It was a direct line from the incident to this declaration. So that brings us to the core of this whole thing, the specific legal weapon he plans on using. Now, this isn't some brand new law, but the way he's proposing to use it is incredibly broad. The entire plan really hangs on this one little clause, Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act. This single provision is what could potentially give a president the power to enact a ban this sweeping all on his own. Okay, so what is Section 212F? Let's actually break down what this law does and the kind of power it hands over to the executive branch. It's a lot. So here's the deal with Section 212F. It basically says the president can suspend the entry of any group of immigrants if he decides their entry would be, and I'm quoting here, detrimental to the interests of the United States. And here's the real kicker. The suspension can last for as long as the president thinks is necessary. Now, you see the phrase limited authority there, but the language is so broad that it's been fought over in court for years, with the Supreme Court usually siding with the president's power. Now, to justify a move this big, Trump's post on social media pointed to a pretty stark number. A ratio of 1 immigrant for every 6 Americans. The claim was that this ratio is higher than it's ever been, and that's being framed as a key reason for needing such a drastic ban. You know, the words we use in these debates are often just as important as the policies themselves. The term third world has come up, so it's probably a good idea to understand where that phrase even comes from. These terms actually had nothing to do with money or economic status at first. They were created during the Cold War to basically sort countries into boxes based on who they were aligned with, the US, the Soviet Union, or neither. And you can see the original breakdown right here. You had the First World, which was the US and its allies. The Second World was the Soviet bloc. And the Third World? That was everyone else, the non-aligned nations, a lot of them in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Over the years, the meaning totally shifted to be more about economics, but that's where it started. Okay, so this brings us to the million-dollar question. Who's actually affected by this? Let's get into the specifics of the policy and the actual list of countries being targeted. So the plan would roll out in 3 key stages. First, a really strict re-review of all current green cards from these so-called countries of concern. Second, the policy would be designed to go into effect immediately. And third, it would apply to any new applications filed on or after November 27, 2025, a very specific cutoff date. And here are some of the nations on that list. We're talking about places like Afghanistan, Iran, Libya, Somalia, and Venezuela. Now, this isn't a brand new list they just came up with. It's the same group of countries that were put on a travel restriction list back in a June order, usually for national security reasons. But it's also really important to see who is not on this list. The source material makes a point to say that India is not one of the targeted nations. And that's a pretty big detail, especially given how many Indian nationals come to the US. So what's the official reasoning? This quote from Joseph Edlow, the director of US Citizenship and Immigration Services, really sums it up. He framed it as a national security issue, saying that Americans shouldn't have to pay the price for what he called the negligent policies of the past. A proposal like this, it just raises this massive question about where U.S. immigration is heading in the long run. I mean, a move this big could signal a huge shift away from the policies we've seen for decades. And that really leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? The plan's out there, the legal tool has been named, but actually making it happen, that's going to face some serious legal and political fights, for sure. So is this just a temporary measure, or is it the start of a permanent change in American immigration? That's the question that will likely define the next few years. Thanks for tuning in.